Hello everyone, my name is Vanessa Headley. I am here representing Company B, Best Shot, which includes myself, Charles Trunkale, Dawn Cunningham, and Lachey Tolliver. This week we will discuss decision making and crisis management in the business world, so please join us. This project is based on the broad topic of decision making. It is focused on exploring crisis management in the business world today. The meaning and concept behind crisis management will be explained, and various situations will be provided as examples to enable critique and evaluate of which processes employed by companies or governments did or didn't work out so well. So what is a crisis? A crisis can be defined in a few ways that generally sum up the same meaning. According to dictionary.com, the first meaning is a stage in a sequence of events at which the trend of all future events, especially for better or for worse, is determined, turning point. Secondly, a condition of instability or danger, as in social, economic, political, or international affairs leading to a decisive change. Third, a dramatic, emotional, or circumstantial upheaval in a person's life. From these three definitions, we could pretty much see that there's one common point to be taken, which is that crisis brings about change in people's lives that can drastically alter their quality of life. Some effects of crisis can be corrected and some may be long-lasting and not repairable. It all depends on the type of crisis suffered and how much preparation was done beforehand and the amount of trained individuals that were available to help respond in the event of a disaster. So what types of crisis may be affected? There are several. One of the most popular ones that we are facing today in businesses is the financial crisis. With the falling value of various world currencies and declining credit ratings amongst nations that were once financial leaders, it is very apparent that financial crisis can lead to painstaking and long-lasting consequences, such as bankruptcies and closing of the corporations altogether. Next is natural disasters. These are somewhat unpredictable and sometimes unavoidable. Hurricanes, for example, can be detected with such things as like a weather radar, but the exact course for which they will travel is always subjected to variation of normally up to 250 miles or more, which causes victims to not really know if they're in the path or not until a couple days right beforehand. Social crisis is related to the fact that so many businesses are dependent on social media forums in order to market their service or products to a broader base of customers who interact on such sites like Twitter or Facebook. If a company employee were to post something inappropriate or potentially damaging while acting on behalf of the company, it could cause media firestorm and upset many customers or future customers. Global crisis has always existed and will always exist to some extent. Wars are what so many countries have been founded on, as well as political reasons. Famine is inevitable in a world where so many people are being born and natural resources are being depleted faster and faster each passing day. Technological crisis is possible due to the extreme dependency on technology. If we were to have a serious technological meltdown that resulted in computers not working right and the internet going down completely, there would be some serious security threats and large losses due to the prevalence of e-commerce in today's business world. Lastly, man-made crisis could be the result of nuclear meltdown at a power point, or if weapons of mass destruction were to get in the wrong hands of terrorists or extremists, radical groups that would be foolish enough to use them. So what is crisis management? Many people ask, what exactly is crisis management? It is a person's, company, or civic national entity's ability to plan for, mitigate the effects of, and respond to the needs of individuals in the event of a crisis. So there are some steps to succeed. In order to properly manage a crisis situation, the first step requires diagnosing the problem. This step involves analyzing and evaluation of the situation at hand and requires that decisions be made which will help the victims first and foremost, and then deal with the concerns of the company thereafter. Next, the company must assemble a team of devoted a devoted team to handle the crisis. There must be adequate planning amongst those who are trained or in positions to make such decisions as to what to do to circumvent the crisis beforehand and how to handle it after it occurs. Upon developing a quality plan to deal with a crisis, this team and other coworkers involved in the management process must implement decisions and put the crisis plan into action. The final step is an ongoing process for an undetermined amount of time after the situation. Things are going to change, and as they change, there must be a commitment by the company to ensure managers and supervisors are prepared for that change and can properly train their employees on how to transition as a result of the ongoing changes. So, there are some keys to crisis management. There are a few main steps when a company is faced with impending crisis. The first is for the company to protect all their people who were impacted by the disaster. It's the responsibility for a good company to ensure that the individuals impacted are cared for first and foremost prior to tending the needs and desires of the company's shareholders. This was said by Douglas in 2010. Doing this more often than not will result in the company benefiting from the added recognition as a humanitarian-focused organization and the boost in company morale. This show of good faith will result in long-term reputation for the company and can be depended upon, trusted to do the right thing, even at the risk of taking significant losses. The next rule of thumb is to be adhered by the company facing imminent crisis, to accept responsibility for any and all matters that occur as a result of the catastrophe, which was at least partially caused by your company. That means even if that means taking the blame that wasn't necessarily for the fault of your company. This just shows a lot of character on the part of the organization. The fact that your company is willing to show caution aside and accept responsibility without clamoring the battling about who else should be made responsible will show corporate maturity and help gain customer loyalty and empathy in the face of a crisis. Customer emotions and opinions at stake. Depending on how a company handles a crisis situation will determine what level of emotions customers will feel towards that company and what type of opinions will cast about that company. The flip side of that is that if a company is slow to accept responsibility and attempts to point blame at others, it will have a negative impact on their reputation and lead to distrust and scrutiny amongst customers and public opinion. These two emotions play a big part on how customers in the public, and also the amount at which the company will be forgiven in the event of a disastrous situation. Theories. There are a few theories that exist on the topic of crisis management which can be used to help guide a company on its path to avoidance of or restoration following a situation. The first is the structural function systems theory, which states that communication plays a vital role in the success of any crisis management plan or process. This communication must be routed in a correct and efficient manner across all applicable levels of employees. Transparency, essentially, and silence can be a detrimental thing in times of a disaster and should be avoided. Managers and supervisors must maintain a strong sense of leadership in times like these so as to promote a positive and hardworking attitude to the employees to push through the situation. The next theory, diffusion of innovation theory, states that each employee must be called on to be open with suggestions and information flow during a tough circumstance that a company may be facing. It is times such as emergencies that certain genius can be recognized, some of the least expecting individuals. Those who are able to look past the calamitous situation and think outside of the box can be most beneficial to the success, implementation, and resolution of a predicament. Upon discovering worthy ideas, there must be a widespread and immediate conveying of the idea to the entire workforce and crisis management team involved. The next theory helps to shed light on what actions can lead to internal crisis for a company. Unequal human capital theory states that demographic and social inequality amongst employees can lead to unrest and potentially devastating actions by those employees that feel discriminated against. This could lead to social media mishaps that are intentionally aimed to weak points in the company, which could lead to significant embarrassment and lost revenue for the company. It could also lead to much worse situations such as hostage situations or even worse, deaths. if a person who feels discriminated decided to retaliate in such a heinous manner. So let's take a look at some examples of crises that have been experienced by companies. The first type to be reviewed is social media mishaps. Domino's provides a prime example of how a company on the rebound in recent years that has had a great leadership team in place which knows exactly how to defuse a potentially damaging situation. After some less than professional videos of uniformed Domino's employees performing unacceptable behavior while on the clock went viral, the new CEO, Patrick Doyle, stepped up to the plate and took on the criticism and disgruntled customers face on by giving them a chance to reveal their emotions and critiques for the situation on live Facebook and Twitter feeds, while he actively participated in the discussions. Prior to doing so, he posted a video apology, addressing the issue and assuring customers that this was not the manner in which Domino's employees would act going forward. By taking a proactive role in owning up to his employees' shenanigans, he not only gained the respect of the majority of the public and customers who may be offended, but along with some corporate restructuring, efficient business decisions, and customer-inclusive marketing campaigns. Doyle has brought Domino's into much financial success and growing profits over the last 2 years. This is a good example of how a company can turn tragedy into triumph when dealing with social media networks. Hurricane Katrina was a horrible disaster when it came on shore in Louisiana in August 29, 2005. The effects of the wind damage was quite substantial. However, true poison of this hurricane was a storm surge which caused the levee system in New Orleans to fail, which flooded the city. This was one of the most costly natural disasters, both financially and physically, costing billions in losses to property, income, and infrastructure, and killing nearly 1,800 individuals in total. One of the worst things about this that stuck out was the severe mismanagement in the handling of the crisis immediately after and even for the months that followed. Our president at the time, George Bush, didn't make it to New Orleans for 4 days following the disaster, and his initial visit was quite brief. Although there were crisis plans in place and practice for such events, they completely failed. Not to mention there were no provisions in those plans for such important things as crime prevention and transportation. The Department of Homeland Security and FEMA were called into action only 2 days prior to hurricane making landfall in the Gulf, although models were forecasting the disaster for days out after it passed on Florida on the 23rd. There was such poor job done on FEMA's director, Michael Brown, that he was dismissed from his position after only 2 weeks in New Orleans. The fact that he had absolutely no prior experience at handling crisis situations, and then he was thrown out into one of the worst possible disasters, would likely have something to do with his inept actions and failure. Thank you. That concludes our presentation on crisis management and decision making. I'm glad you could join us and hope you enjoyed it.